to begin.
You're listening to Magrito Podcast Network, celebrating the culture of Chicanos and Latinos one story and voice at a time. Listen to more Magrito Podcast Network shows over at magrito.net.
Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to KQBH-LP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, broadcasting live on your FM dial and streaming on kqbhla.com. You're listening to the Social Primate with your host, Eddie Aguirre. And today we have the powerful Ben Camacho, Rob Camacho, and Abraham Marquez. Thank you so much for being here.
For sure, it's happy to be back.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
It's an honor.
It's an absolute pleasure.
I wanted to start off with just saying, like, just to add how I felt when I saw all of us kind of congregate here was that, like, back in August I saw Abe at the Chicana Moratorium, the 54th anniversary, and and whenever you think about that, you can't help but think about Ruben Salazar as well, and kind of the stuff that he stood up for and he kind of meant to the community up until his untimely death, and just seeing like the future of what that looks like happening now. We're part of it. One way or another, we're part of that, and we're continuing that legacy. So again, thank you so much for being here and making this happen, because I think it's important to have a conversation where we can bring people from different regions of Southern California, right? Santa Ana, San Diego, and just LA area, just kind of come in and kind of see that there's these issues that keep us together, connected. So yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back on, man.
Hey, for reals, and to start that off, I want to just get deep into this, but today marks like 366 days that we've seen the genocide in Gaza take place. And it feels like it did the first day. It's just devastation and destruction and all these emotions that are kind of hard sometimes to kind of put into words. But, here we are. And I feel like what's going on right now, it's just going to, affect everything, kind of just the implications it's going to have in the future with journalism, the integrity of just the media and stuff. So hence why I wanted to have this conversation and see where you guys stand in those points.
It's devastating, 100%. I know I've noticed, I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed that we're not seeing as much as the brutality of it, because they've killed over 150 journalists that were sacrificing their lives to report on the reality of that Palestinians are dealing with in Gaza. This past weekend, there was that CBS reporter who also worked for PBS who tried to self-immolate and was stopped. And we have to, history is our biggest teacher. I talked to Ben about this, but the New York Times 3-4 years after the invasion of Iraq came out with a letter pretty much saying, I'm sorry for reporting things that were wrong, but sorry, okay, none of them lost their job. In their apology letter, they stated on there that they published things without verifying. And what did that lead to? That lead to 1 million Iraqis dead. Innocent people. For what? For what?
Yeah.
Right? And, I only bring this up because what is it going to take for the industry here in the U.S. to come to that self-realization that what they're doing is enabling this damn genocide as journalists. And there has to be some kind of awakening at some point, because it's going to get worse, because now you're seeing them continue to bomb Lebanon. They want to go into war with Iran. It's just going to become deadlier than what we have been seeing for the last 12 months.
And I think something to kind of piggyback off that, it's like, regarding Iran, I listened to the New York Times podcast yesterday or something like that, and there was a lot of things that made me extremely mad while listening to it. But one of the things was that they were talking about Iran and their nuclear weapons program, and to me that kind of harkens back to that language of weapons of mass destruction that we kept hearing back, in like whatever year that was, that we went to war out there. And I think it feels like they're setting up the stage for a much larger operation. Obviously, I'm speculating here, and I do want to highlight that, like, I have no idea what's going to happen with all of that, but that's what it feels like as a reporter when I look at how the media is talking about it right now and comparing it to what we already went through 20-something years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Eddie, the thing is that myself and my two colleagues here, all of us grew up, in this post 9/11, the Iraq War era. And back then, people in the media could have said, well, we didn't have things like social media. We didn't have Twitter and Facebook and, mobile phones like, iPhones and stuff like that. But we do have that technology now. We can share things, with the blink of an eye, like something could happen halfway across the world and you and I, everyone else can see it here. But we're still seeing the same thing. We're still seeing the same lies perpetuated. We're still seeing the same propaganda being used to prop up for other proxy wars or direct conflicts that the U.S. could potentially get involved in, several months, years down the line. And the lack of outrage from our colleagues in the journalism industry is absolutely deafening, because 150 journalists dead in Gaza is absolutely ridiculous. That's more people that died throughout the entire Vietnam War conflict. And it's 20 years even before the U.S. got involved. And that's in less than the span of a year. And the fact that there's not more people speaking out about it is, just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, and just to kind of underline that, what we've seen in this past year regarding reporters being killed, it is the largest mass killing of reporters that we have ever witnessed in history. I'm going to say that again because I feel like there are so many outlets out there that haven't really thought about what that means. We are watching the largest mass killing of our colleagues happening in real time, and it's continuing every single day.
And that's the numbers that we know of. The Lancet published a report in July, I think it was. There's over 10,000 bodies still under the rubble that we have no idea. Could be medics, can be healthcare workers, everyday people, journalists. So the number is much larger than what we know of. Yeah.
From my understanding was that there's these so-called protections through either, I think, the United Nations or the Geneva
Convention.
Convention that states that, in order to keep like an unbiased accountability in war, journalists are allowed, right? Freedom of the press to kind of report things as they come. But when you start seeing this happen and it's not, and these organizations are condemning it, but there's no action on it, it starts making you think like, this whole system is really just a charade that benefits obviously the top five, right? Those are the five parties that in the United Nations have the ability to veto things at their will. Yeah.
And we can only thank the Palestinian resistance, the Palestinian people, for fully exposing the world.
Yeah.
Just think about what the narrative was more than 12 months ago, right? The U.S. was still posturing as like, well, we're going to work for a two-state solution. We're trying to build peace. 12 months later, that is out the window. Now Israel has they have the sympathy capital of October 7th to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Because them killing journalists is not new. I mean, the Great March of Return in 2018, they had snipers.
Yeah, exactly.
Shooting them down. And again, these organizations, these protections from the Geneva Convention, nothing happened to them.
Yeah, I think just something that I want to highlight is that we talk about freedom of the press, but we have this Geneva Convention, and at the end of the day, those are words on a piece of paper, words on a document, but that is not going to hold up to an Israeli rifle coming in through your door and telling, the local Al Jazeera station that they need to get out.
Right.
It's the same thing when journalists are denied entry into Gaza, or when they have to report and run their reporting through the IDF censor. Which I think there was a story from The Intercept that talked about how it was either the New York Times or CNN that was actively working with that censor in place.
Yeah, the New York Times. It was. I remember that article. The New York Times. They're running by the IDF and the Pentagon before they publish something, so it's not so telling.
That's crazy. And I mean, on top of that, you have to take into account like the self-censorship of people because they're working for specific outlets or corporations. You want to lose your job, then obviously you're going to want to talk about this stuff. But a lot of people don't want to go through that. And, and that just means you lose your network. You lose everything that kind of, allowed you to kind of be in that position. And that's one thing a lot of the times, sometimes we don't take into account as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, we have definitely seen over the past 12 months these social media companies that over the years have, they've positioned themselves and they champion themselves as bastions of, freedom of the press and, the town square of the world and stuff like that. But then they're taking down, accounts of well-known public figures that have millions of followers. One of them being Sean King. Has had millions of followers on Instagram, and his account was absolutely nuked for fairly early on in the genocide. For simply just sharing what other journalists in Gaza were reporting on. And it really just goes to show the hypocrisy, kind of going back, you're saying about, these rules of conflict and the Geneva Convention. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of what we were experiencing during the Trump era here in this country, was that a lot of things that we believe or what we have thought of as rules or norms are really just suggestions. And they really don't mean nothing if they're not enforced. And it really matters, who's enforcing it. Because, like Ben said, what does a sentence on a paper mean, if it's going against like an Israeli gun, or if those rules aren't actually being followed, or there are no consequences for, breaking, those agreements.
Yeah, and this is like a gradual shift, because in the early years of the Vietnam War, what really sparked the movement, the anti-war movement, was that these reporters were publishing pictures of dead babies, dead people. And that pissed people off, because like, you don't want, why is our government on the other side of the world bombing a country that has nothing to do with us and killing innocent people and children? And that's what sparked the anger, right? And kind of helped the movement. Since then, I mean, even in the Iraq War, there was like no media access, like very limited, reporting from the outside, like, because the Pentagon and the U.S. knows they're going to do what they want to do to, move on with their imperial ambitions, and they're going to keep the media in the back because they don't want the truth to be coming out. And even people from high echelons of the IDF world have openly said that they can't control TikTok.
Yeah.
The truth is if the truth is coming out on
sharing
TikTok,
those reels.
Yeah, it was funny to watch. It was like, yeah, that's the young generation sharing the truth, and they have no way of controlling it. And that's kind of one of the reasons why they wanted to buy or to destroy TikTok, was because they had no control of it.
The crazy part is that you guys are mentioning the Iraq War, and it's like one of the prominent people that we saw, or at least whistleblowers at the time, was Julian Assange. And just until couple months ago is when he got I guess released, right, because he pleaded guilty. But he had released a video, I think one of his first speeches since his release, was saying that he didn't plead guilty. I'm going to misquote it.
I didn't plead guilty to journalism. He just wanted to get out. Yeah.
All he did was just provide information to the public, information that the public should know, right, to hold these, again, institutions accountable. And what happened? It cost him 20 years basically of his life.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really strong connection there, because one of the main, I guess, pieces of information that he shared was this. It was like an aerial vehicle that the Army was using, and they you hear the audio where you can kind of hear them talk through, asking for permission to shoot or something like that, and then permission is granted. They mow down a bunch of people. I think one was a reporter, and that's exactly what's going on now. People are getting bombed indiscriminately. Reporters are getting also killed indiscriminately, or also targeted as well. And like, imagine if we were back whenever, I forget what year Julian Assange dropped that video, but it's like, if that's the video that kind of set things in motion for him, and at this point we've had over 150 instances of kind of a similar situation of a reporter dying, where does that leave us? What direction are we going in, really?
Yeah, because Ben brings up a good point, because when those WikiLeaks videos were released, that was in 2011, and by that point the Iraq War was already winding down. I think the war officially came to a close in 2012. Just imagine if we were seeing those kind of videos and images at the beginning of the war when that video was actually shot. And and that's what's happening right now. I mean, like, video like that could have turned the tide of the war. That could have completely changed the the public's perception of what was going on, and what we're fighting for, and like the things that we're trying to liberate, people from the tyranny of the Saddam regime. And I feel like like when you actually show people what's going on, like that, it really just shows them the reality of what's happening. And just the vileness of war, especially a war that is propped up on lies.
Yeah, and in the beginning, all these publications were like all about WikiLeaks. Like they were all like, oh, Julian Assange leaked this and published this, and then something must have happened. They must have gotten a talk by someone, because now like they're all at like hate Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, because they gotta keep their access, to the government. So
right,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those situations that make you, if you really pay attention, you start seeing like, right through the lines, because again, this is not, it hasn't been just a single incident of this. We've seen plenty of them at this point. And when you really think about it, if that's happening abroad, right? Of course, they're not going to be bombing and sniping journalists here, because that will obviously that will be headlines everywhere. But what does that really look like? It's going to be a toned down version of that. I feel like you specifically, Ben, had some close incidents into what can be when the city or the local government tries to get and stop information from coming out, and that's just a speck of it, right? In this case, it was a legal thing. But what happens if we allow these things to not have any like lines, right? Any boundaries? Like where does it stop? What becomes the next? I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, it does.
Where do we go from there, basically?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question, and it's something I feel like I don't even want to answer, but to me it feels like it would set a new normal, that attacking reporters is okay, that there's no repercussions for it, that you can shoot and bomb and kill as many reporters as you want, and the US will, pat you on the back and send you more bombs to continue doing so. At least that's what's happening in Israel, because I mean, I forget when I first saw like the first report of a Palestinian journalist being killed within the past year, but I remember it being early on. It must have been within the first month or so. And I was outraged. I felt like there was a lot of outrage at the time too, but then, we kind of see it just like snowball, and, now we're at 10, we're at 20, as the months go by. Statements are made. National orgs eventually put something together, and they kind of ask the government to like respect the rights of reporters to work freely. But I mean, it's been several months since I saw anything from these national orgs to call for the end of attacking reporters out there.
And kind of to contrast to what you also said, Eddie, like even though, yes, we live here in the States, and yeah, maybe we don't have to worry about being bombed necessarily, but we look at so much technology that police departments have now, MRAPs, drones, Stingray technology, using bombs to blow up people, in hostage situations, stuff like that. These are all weaponry that was pioneered in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And we're fooling ourselves to believe that these technologies and these tactics are not eventually going to find their ways back from overseas and to the shores of America and be used against our communities, because they absolutely have. Because, if we look at police departments 20 years ago, they did not have this technology that was pioneered in these wars.
And I think a real world example of that is Israeli tech being imported. I think of Joey Scott's reporting about Cobwebs. Cobwebs is a social media surveillance tool that was developed by, I think, former NSO directors or employees. And now the LAPD uses it to monitor our social medias.
Yeah, probably monitoring this conversation right now.
When I think it was a few months ago when the Israeli military blew up over 1,000 phones or 1,000 pagers in Lebanon.
Oh, right, yeah.
That the way they painted it was like, oh, these are all Hezbollah, members, and they're terrorists and XYZ and whatever. We all know that's not true, right? But the fact that they were able to have bombs in people's pockets when they're chilling at home, A lot of them were in the grocery store. A lot of doctors use pagers, teachers. Like there was regular people. I mean, I think it was over 3,000 people got hit. And you can only imagine the people around you.
Yeah.
That is scary.
That's a terrorist attack.
That is a terrorist.
Yeah, that's the
100%.
definition.
That is 100% a terrorist attack. No one went to jail for it. No one's been held accountable. And to me, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, I can only imagine what else they have, like what other kind of technology that they have that they at the click of a button can destroy someone.
And what does it look like when that's normalized?
Yeah.
Because it's been done once. So what now? Like what is it to do it again, or to start using something like that domestically? Or
what if Hezbollah or any of what they consider, the axis of evil, or what if they use it on Israelis? How would it be painted? They would
call it a terrorist attack right off the bat.
But the New York Times was like, oh, this was a very creative way, and like
special operation.
Yeah, special operation. They're using all things available to them to attack them. I'm just like, that's the corporate media normalizing this a terrorist attack.
They broke out the whole entire thesaurus to say everything but it was a terrorist attack.
Yeah, but that's how
mental gymnastics.
That's how they keep that power balanced in their favor, because they're using these words that you can twist them around and it makes it sound like you're for the cause, like you're doing it, like it's just it fixates on something else rather than the reality of what's actually going on. It's like when you say casualties instead of deaths, it's like, okay, you're removing the emotion from it, the disconnection, and it's a trip, and kind of like how you mentioned, Rob, like what does it look like when they start implementing these technologies or just bringing these tactics here? In UCLA and USC, they had the student protest when they were staying on school campus, and I think just recently they reported, I want to say it was LA Public Press or one of those outlets that said that they had recently invested more money to get like protections in school. Yeah,
it was LA Public Press. I read that same one. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, so like, what are we looking at in the future? Like, if this is how they're reacting now, we're seeing these tactics just kind of be expanded in places that we thought were like these pillars of truth, right? For the youth especially.
I think in a lot of ways what we're seeing is because I think a lot of this has its origins in the post 9/11 era. We're seeing as the Bush doctrine come to life and coming home to roost in the United States. And I feel like a lot of these conflicts overseas were urban wars being practiced to eventually bring back home. And I think that we're seeing that with just the perpetual militarization of the police at every single level, even for trivial things. I mean, like why does a university need M16s or an MRAP or sound cannons? I mean, these are institutions that we're taught are supposed to be bastions of education, but then they're being funded like they're like a tiny militia. I mean, like, come on, like who are they fooling?
Yeah. I mean, you can say, what examples are they setting for future, generations, for them to stand up and do something like this if they're going to be faced with police forces that are militarized? Like what are you going to do?
I think it's a scare tactic too. It's during the McCarthy era, you couldn't say you were a communist and have a job, right? It was like everyone getting called out. So then a lot of people withheld their political beliefs just so they can have a job, right? And I think in a way that kind of tactic still exists, because I think for journalists, seeing how many people are being killed, how dangerous that job is, I think it probably puts people in a position where like, yeah, I kind of don't want to do that. I don't want to risk my life like that. I don't want to report on something or be involved in something that is going to put my family at jeopardy or anything like that. So I think that comes with somewhat with the territory.
It's a silencing tactic at the end of the day, really.
Yeah.
Now, you as journalists in your respective fields, like, how do you navigate the idea that if you're gonna, put out a story like you were mentioning to us earlier about the Chicano moratorium story? I don't know if you can talk about that, but how it was kind of like changed a little bit to just fit that polished article that they were going to produce to the public. Like, how do you balance what you want to say versus what these institutions want you to say?
I mean, I don't. I feel like I'm at the point where, and this is kind of, me coming out of this whole lawsuit stuff that happened to me, and like really impacted by what I went through with all of that. And I think in in my head, I think ultimately it was a way to try to silence me or intimidate me. And what that has translated into for me is that I'm just never going to compromise on what I'm going to say because somebody else wants me, or, you know, an institution or an outlet or whatever, you know, wants me to frame it a certain way. I'm going to just say it how I see it and just keep it real with that. Not compromising really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, to kind of piggyback off what Ben was saying too, it's like you just don't compromise on your ideals. And you know, Ben has written for bigger publications, so I think that, you know, like the potential for, you know, pushback from your editors or your team, you know, to like kind of, you know, tidy up your language, if you will, you know, for general audiences is a little bit greater. But I think for other journalists, sometimes staying true to yourself also means that you could kind of get pigeonholed. The smaller outlets that they give you that freedom to kind of say what you want, you know, and to, you know, to speak the truth, but also, you know, your reach is, you know, only goes so far, you know, with that. And it's getting more and more difficult, especially as we see a lot more legacy publications like either get consolidated or just outright shut down. And then just the, you know, mainstream media and the state just, you know, more and more just in bed with one another, and it's difficult. I don't really know an easier way to put it. You know, like it really makes you question sometimes as a journalist. It's like, okay, how far am I going to go for something? You know, and dig my heels in and be like, no, this absolutely needs to stay. This cannot change. You know, like this I'm not going to compromise on this. And I think sometimes there is room for you to. There's discussions that could be had, but I do think there's some things that are red line that can't be crossed. And, you know, if you want to stick to, you know, your convictions, you know, you put up that fight and you push back, be like, no, like this needs to stay. This is an integral part of this report.
And I think a red line for me, to kind of tie it back to like the genocide that we're watching, a red line is watching colleagues get killed. Yeah. That's just something that I don't think there is room for discussion on. I just think that if we all collectively and this would probably never happen, but if collectively journalists just started telling the truth and like the real truth about what is happening in Gaza and stop compromising because their editors want them to say certain things, or, you know, the funders want them to keep a certain narrative, then I think the war at this point in time would have looked a lot different.
Yeah, 100%. Because, you know, they're risking their lives being out there and reporting their own. And not even, like, there's been a bunch of pictures and videos that really, like, broke my heart. But one of them was this Al Jazeera reporter reporting on her own building being blown up live. And it's just like, like, how do you withhold, like, any, even thinking about it right now, I just want to, and then there was another reporter who, you know, lost his family, and then he had to like take in kids because they lost their parents, and it's like they're playing a role of like a caretaker too. And and how do you see that and not just think like, what are we doing? You know, if you work for the New York Times or CNN or PBS or any of these big outlets, how do you see that and just be like, well, we'll bypass it and report it a different way? You know, like that's a decision that they are making. To see that and ignore it and publish something different, like completely, like you're telling your readers and your listeners or whatever that don't believe what you're seeing on your phone. Believe what we're typing here. You know, I don't know. It's just bizarre, man. It's just bizarre.
No, it's a trip, like you said. You're seeing one thing consistently, right? Like on my Instagram feed, you know, I follow a bunch of pages, and every day I'm blasted. Every time I open Instagram, I'm blasted with a video of some tragedy happening, you know, in these spaces. And you can't, you know, I'm looking at them, and I have a 5-month-old kid, dude. I'm seeing videos of babies dead, being pulled out of the rubble, like blown up, you know, this. Just devastating, dude. And it makes me think, right, that I'm connecting there as a father, you know, in that specific video or moment. And I'm just thinking, like, how? Like, we're all products of a family, you know, of people that we've seen grow up and just cherish memories with. And for you to think that this is not important to those people and it's multiplied throughout the country. It's like, where are we with our humanity, you know? Like, and then people still come and tell you like, well, they shouldn't have started it. It's like, oh my God.
I mean, that's the biggest gaslight of it all, right?
Yeah.
Because to say that, you know, this has been going on for a year is glossing over 75, 76 years of occupation.
I think the last person that did the self-immolation, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Samuel Mena Jr.
Yeah, there you go. And I have a quote from him here. He says, "To the 10,000 children in Gaza that have lost a limb in this conflict, I give you my left arm. I pray my voice was able to rise up yours and that your smiles never disappear," before he lit his arm on fire.
Yeah.
And it's like, dang, you know, like, again, we don't have to be connected through blood to feel these things, to understand that the pain that's being caused, right? Mm-hmm. And this is just one speck. And I think he went on to say more, but it went in regards, or along the words of saying that how many people have died based on the lies that he's told or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there was a line there that he said that he vividly remembers working on a misinformation piece.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what kind of triggered, I mean, I don't say triggered, but I think that's kind of what, like, it was like, dude, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, when I came across that situation, was it like 3 days ago?
It was pretty recent.
Yeah, and immediately I saw myself in him, because he's a young Latino photojournalist, right, or videographer, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I just had this moment where I felt like that could be me, you know, because I feel like I read his statement and I feel everything that he's saying. You know, only obviously he got to that point where he had to act in that way. I'm glad that he's alive, but we do not need to be setting ourselves on fire for the world to understand that Palestinian lives matter.
Yeah, 100%. But anyway, it's going to take an awakening from the industry. And I've never been in those shoes where I work for a big outlet, and I don't think I ever will be. But I can only imagine being surrounded by it, where, like, you're just like, yo, man, this is not good. And other people are just probably like, oh, whatever, I don't care, it's my job, I'm not going to risk my life or anything like that. And it's just like being in a position where you're just like, what the hell do I do? Right? Like, you know, and like Ben said, like, we don't have to, I mean, they don't have to be burning themselves, but the industry needs to wake up. To wake up. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was it Aaron Bushnell?
Yeah,
he died, you know, burning himself. But again, one of those things that I'm sure a lot of people turned away from it. You know, they didn't want to see somebody being lit on fire. Come on, like nobody wants to go through that trauma. But if you're really looking into the reason he did this, his decision, the context of it, you can start seeing that, like, what they're a part of is wrong. And unfortunate part is they talk about these events, they, you know, highlight them for a couple of days, and now it's like, who is that guy? Like,
yeah, the Aaron Bushnell was very I think, an awakening moment for a lot of people. I know for me, I was just like, because then you know, if there's a soldier that falls off of a tank and gets hurt, you know, the president makes sends a letter, does something. They didn't even mention his name.
Yeah,
like, they didn't even bring it up. And that kind of tells you the orientation coming out of the White House. We're not gonna mention this at all, because we know that was the ultimate sacrifice to bring awareness to Gaza, and he got, you know, the name, the martyrdom from the resistance, which is, you know, specifically for Palestinians and people fighting against the occupation. Was, you know, seeing his face all over, you know, Syria and Yemen, like, as like a someone who did something for us. Yeah, you know, it's, you know, kind of touching too. But
yeah, it was powerful. It was like one of the largest moments of like international solidarity that I've ever seen, and that also reminds me of seeing, I think, the folks' tents in Rafah saying "Thank you, students" or something like that. Those are moments of really powerful solidarity that the most directly impacted people are feeling, right? And, you know, they're the ones being bombed and they're saying thank you. That's, I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, man. I mean, and again, it's an international thing. So with the information, the technology we have, you know, regardless if a lot of the time it feels like it works against us, we were able to relay that message from across the world, to let them know, like, hey, you have people behind you here, Now, I'm curious to know, like we were talking earlier about the Iraq War, how a couple years later, after it was winding down, we get this information, we start getting these videos that we didn't know existed until then, and now we can kind of start talking about it. So what are we going to find out after this, after whatever resolution comes up to with the situation? Like, what information is going to leak out that's going to then infuriate people and be like, what, how did you allow this to happen? Well, we're doing it now, and that's just, I don't even know.
Did you guys see the video today? There was someone produced a video of, it was like these little kids watching what's happening, and like images of what's happening in Gaza, and it was like based in the future, and they're looking back at their parents, are like, and what did you do while this was happening? Like, were you just watching this? I was just like, oh man, that's eye-opening, because it's true. There's so many people that just watching and just like don't want to completely ignore it. But I mean, there's already a lot of bad stuff out there, of what's happening, like actual documentation of what's happening, that I can only imagine it's going to be worse.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with your question just because like you're asking us to speculate a bit, and like I think what I would want to focus on is what can we do now, right? And I think for me, it means trying to rally up as many of my colleagues to speak out about what we're seeing. Because, there's a reason that the New York Times is reporting. They're not, it's not that they're oblivious, right? They know exactly what's happening, and they're making these decisions that, Abraham was just talking about. That's a decision, right? That they're making to push a certain narrative. But why do they do that? It's because they know that they have sway in how things can go. If they started reporting, the truth and calling things what they are, calling it a genocide, then, like I said earlier, this whole thing would look very different. And I think, so that's where I land. We just have to focus on what can we do right now, and don't stop talking about what's happening. Try to activate other folks, speak to people who are sitting on the fence or just seem, like they don't care about it. Tell them why it does matter.
Now, in regards to, again, like your specific fields where you guys report on, because I know journalists overall, but I know you guys still focus on specific areas of this medium, like how has that impacted your work now? Like,
I think for me, so I haven't written a piece about, the genocide or anything like that. But I think for me, being a photographer, being a photojournalist as well. So I was photographing the 1 year mark rally of this past Saturday. I was out there with Abraham. And I think just kind of like slowing down and considering what a lot of these folks who are out there are feeling, like, because there's a lot of Arabic people that go to these things, like the majority are, and I can't fully understand how they're feeling about it. But I think having this level of empathy as a reporter, and understanding that photographing this is a big deal to a lot of these people who finally feel like they have a voice or have a say as to what the public understands about their struggles, right? So I think in that sense, that's how it's affected my work.
Yeah, just like Ben, I haven't formally written a report about Gaza because we're here in the States, so we're not foreign conflict correspondents, so we're a little bit limited on what we can cover. But like I have on my own time, shot photography and video. I shot at the encampment at UCSD, and I think that highlighting the insight of people who were either in that encampment or people who were just coming by, because it was set up right in the middle of the university, and you had like thousands of people who came through to see speakers speak or to make speeches, and there's a myriad of other public speakers that came through the university. And I think that actually, when you actually get like the temperature check of the general public and how they feel about this, it's very enlightening, because it's not just hand selected. Well, here's what a government official thinks, or here's what a professor at XYZ University who may or may not have some biased opinion because they're getting paid to say something specifically. When you actually get, like the thoughts of like real working class people and people who, quite frankly, see a little bit of their own struggle here in the States mirrored in the struggle for Palestinian liberation. I think there's no mistake, and it's no accident that a lot of Black and brown and Indigenous folk here in the United States see a lot of themselves, or if not in part, some of themselves mirrored in that struggle, especially given our own history of colonization and violence against marginalized communities here in the States. And I think that it's important as us, as journalists, that we make those connections, and that we make a conflict that is halfway across the world. And it's, for a lot of people, it's very nebulous. It's kind of intangible. There's a lot of people that probably couldn't even point to Palestine on a map if you asked them to. But when you make those connections, it makes it a little bit more relatable, and it humanizes those people. It's not just, a statistic or 40,000 people, died. When you actually put a face, a name to that, and you see the connections in your own life, because like you said, we all have families. We all have loved ones, people that love and care about us, and it would be absolutely devastating if we saw something like that happen to our neighbors or our kids or our teachers, our friends. And I think that that's where our power is as journalists, here domestically, who maybe we're not foreign correspondents, but we can still make those connections and those parallels to our struggle here in the States.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit of a different experience, because, I've going to protests, being involved in that activist world is what kind of got me into journalism. So I've documented, I've written about, like when we were there on Saturday, when I met, linked up with the Palestinian youth movement, they get excited when they see me, because I've been going to the protests, writing about it for when it was like, 100 people, and now it's like on average Saturday was like, dude, it was like 15,000 people, it was packed. So for me, it's a little bit different. Now I'm like, oh, finally people are coming, finally people are paying attention. And that's what got me into writing, because I'm a political nerd. I'm always reading what's going on, studying, reading, and to be able to connect the dots when something internationally happens here in LA. Like, I wrote about the first large demonstration for Palestine in LA was in 2021 during the Save Sakjara demonstration in May. There was like a little over 1,000 people, and I wrote about it for LA Taco. And now fast forward, when this first happened 12 months ago, no outlet was out there. It took a while to get any local outlet out there. And then it wasn't until like small publications like LA Public Press, LA Taco started kind of posting stuff on social media. And like, I think that kind of got the legacy media's out here, like, oh, we got to do something about it, but then you read it and you're like, that is not what they were saying at the demonstration. It's like completely. And so for me, it's like, when I see something like when they announced the demonstration on Saturday, I jumped on it, and I was like, I emailed LA Public Press. I was like, hey, I want to cover this because I want to make those connections. I want to be able to give the readers a real historical context of what is happening.
Yeah.
And call a spade, and not say that, well, it's going to be they're working on a 2-state solution, or a ceasefire. No, the ceasefire deal they're not working on that. That is one of the things that gets me really upset, is hearing the Democrats say that word, because the Palestinians know that that's not the case. They have the full power to do it, but they're not doing it. So that's been my experience with the Palestine and in journalism. Is kind of, I feel like I'm doing my best to try to make those connections in my writing, and be very factual about it, because the facts speak for themselves. Like, that's just, you can't. Yeah. There's no gray area.
So what do you think that will look like? I guess this is also speculative, but in regards to taking control of narratives, what will that be like? Making our own independent news organizations? Is that something that's funded outside of the corporations and stuff. I mean, but even then that would have to be people funded or something, right? Like how would that look?
I think, there's been projects that have been springing up all throughout the country in recent times. The one that comes to mind is Hellgate, New York City, I think, is one. It's a worker-led newsroom, essentially. Defector is another one. And these projects are mainly subscription. They make money through subscriptions, essentially. And so personally, I think that's the future. It's the only way that so far that I can imagine that we're going to get out of this mess of, relying on billionaires or, hedge funds to basically, pay our bills.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think, there's a lot of power in having a people-centered subscription-based model for journalists. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just touch base on that, because I know you recently started the Substack, so that's like your means of trying to take control over your storytelling, right? I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I launched a Substack today called Inadvertent. There's a whole backstory to that name. You can read about it on Inadvertent. But yeah, but I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I think, but the main thing is that to have my reporting under my control. You all know what happened with Knock LA. Yeah. I'm not going to rehash that. But having it under my control, but also being able to make editorial decisions on my own, so that it's free of censorship or outside influence. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an interesting approach to, just being able to, again, take the narratives back, being able to give people an unbiased look into what's going on. Because, I mean, that's one of the things, even myself, I'll be scrolling through Instagram, but this algorithm is already tailored to what I'm looking for, and I have to go out of my way to break out of that box to see what else is going on. And me personally, at least, I like to read both sides so I can make my own decision on it and kind of, just move with purpose in a sense, rather than just nah, Washington Post told me this. And it's like, nah, it's not like this. That's not how it goes. It's an interesting conversation to have. And I thank you guys for making the time to do this. But I do want to just highlight some of the stuff that you guys have been working on. If you guys want to plug any articles in there or anything, this will be the perfect time.
We'll just have because of Saturday was the 1 year of Resistance anniversary. I was out there with Ben reporting for LA Public Press. Mm-hmm. So they have the piece and they have Ben's photo. So just look out for LA Public Press. Check them out. Rob,
Well, my latest piece, I did a piece, as you know, I report a lot on the Chicano community in San Diego. So I did a report for Next City on the port of San Diego and how they're making efforts to switch to cleaner energy and reduce their industrial impact on the portside communities of Barrio Logan and National City. That ran on both. It was co-published by Next City and Reckon. Definitely go check those out, because our communities, whether it's in San Diego or Fontana or Inland Empire, are the most likely to be affected by industrial pollution. And I am also a freelance contributor to the San Diego Union Tribune. So if you're in San Diego and listening, make sure to read the paper, because you're going to see a lot more of me in there. So,
Get a subscription.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And then what about you, Ben? Just to finish out on that. I mean, you just mentioned the Substack and all that, but
Google Ben Camacho's Inadvertent Substack. It'll probably come up. I just launched it today, so I don't know how well it's doing in Google, but it is linked on my social media profiles.
Okay. And I mean, and before we wrap this up, just one last question. This is more of a personal question. Maybe too personal. Never mind. I'm going to backtrack a little bit.
You said it now, man. Yeah. Now you got to ask.
You crossed the bridge.
Okay, it's a little cheesy. But it's more like if you guys had the opportunity to kind of look back or start over in your journalistic career, what recommendations, what advice would you give your past self and those people listening?
I would say work on a project. So as a photojournalist, as a documentary photographer, I always hated writing at first. You're gonna have to write, so get used to writing, but also work on a project that is kind of like a long-term project, so that maybe a year or two later, you have a really, really almost like a flagship project that you have on your portfolio that you can then point when you're talking to an editor at a bigger outlet. You can point them to that, and then it shows you're consistent, you're dedicated, and you do good work, hopefully.
Hopefully. What about you, Rob?
Don't do it. I'm kidding. I will say this: it's two-part, if you don't mind. I will say this: it's gonna sound cliche, but it's much like if you do something passionate like art or music. Don't get into this line of work you're expecting to get rich. Do it because you are passionate and you care about it. Because if you care about it, you'll never work a day in your life. Even the bad days are still good days. For my younger self and for young people out there, I'd say for me, take that internship, take those opportunities, because never turn down something or be afraid to take an opportunity, or don't think that you're inexperienced, because there's plenty of other people out there who aren't experienced, but they think they own the world. And they're the ones that make those connections. And sometimes in any field, it's better to know lots of people and reach out to those connections, because a lot of the world, other people network. And I feel like, especially like us from our communities, where we feel like we need to make it on our own. We don't take advantage of like those network opportunities, and we should, because other people do it. So take advantage of those opportunities, whether it's through school, internship, networking. You can never know too many people, especially in journalism, because you want to have your sources. So build those sources and maintain them.
Okay.
I'll piggyback off of both of y'all. Ben, I was just, I'm not ready to share my long-term project, but it's something that I've been thinking about, and I've been like stuck trying to like write about it even more. And until a couple of weeks ago, it finally hit me. And now I'm like that's my focus right now, is to have a solid brainstorm for it's a long-term project. So pretty much work on a long-term project, like Ben said. But don't beat yourself up over it, because it took me from 2020 to now to finally like, oh, I got the angle, I got it. Like, and so now like that's going to be occupying a lot of my space. So yeah, work on that long-term project, keep reading, keep writing. And like Rob said, man, do it for the love of it, for the passion, the labor of love. Because it's, I'm 37, man, and I just discovered journalism, so it's never too late.
I do want to add one last thing to the younger reporters. Stop questioning yourself. We need you. We need your perspective. That's it.
Oh yeah. 100%. Dude, thank you guys again, Ben, Rob, Abe. This is a powerful conversation. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you guys here.
And no, thank you, man. Thank you for giving us a space to be able to speak and talk about the truth.
Thank you so much, Jay. It was an absolute pleasure to come back on.
Thank you, Eddie.
No, of course, guys. And then we have the last thing, Instagram handles. Where can people follow you guys?
Ben Camacho 0, Instagram and X.
Rob_Camacho_SD. It's the same for Twitter, TikTok, the site formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, I use MySpace. IG will be Abe Marquez 02. X is Abe Marquez 3.
Awesome. Thank you guys again. Everybody tuning in. We're going to wrap it up. You're listening to KQBHLP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM. And we'll catch you guys next week.
So thing, now you say damn, realizing you still be on the pay stubs. They caught you, hang up, no conversation, ain't work. The heaviness, super face, your makeup got you looking caked up. Hidden in the crevices of all the pain, it's like you've been trying to find a way to cover up and act the super sane. Dilated it to the depth, there was no pain, especially when you still be letting men dominate your brain. Control is a matter of letting go. Don't let yourself be stolen by the devil's grip or hold. Fooled by temptation, basically sitting your throat. And when the snakes come to find you, cause they're smelling all the blood. Get up, fight the evil force that lies behind you. Crack the code of infinite power, the pen be like a sword. Mastering your innocence, and because you're moving towards those unwell. My method be different, won't be the first to kill. Won't be the first. We'll be the first to heal. I know we got a lot of things, yeah. Got a lot of things I need to grow from. I need to grow from. Got a lot of things I need to grow from. I need to grow from. Got a lot of things I need to grow from. We got a lot of things we need to grow from.
Didn't even look at myself in the face then. Been a kid depressed and filled with hatred. In a world we can't relate with. Some days we contemplate taking his life away quick. Sick of the fighting and shout. So left the house and made route. No doubt traveling to places. Get a time, make the changes. You need to realize it's more to life than just your current situations. My mind raising, struggling, juggling jobs. Me a trouble kid making it hard. Broke my stories, had nothing but hope. And gave the kids nothing but love. So forever in my heart, whenever in my head. Thinking the thoughts, remember us three sharing the bed. Right in the room in someone's apartment. Wondering if soon we'll get our own spot. When my pop's gone now, it's better, but difficult still. Get to work up your mind with the bills. I'm blessed to be where I'm at now, no matter where you are. Grateful for the experiences that got us here. Just can't forget and remember that we are.
Got a lot of things I need to grow from. I need to grow from.